The alarm bells are ringing in Westminster, and the British public is bracing for what could be the most devastating economic reality check in recent years. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who promised stability and ironclad fiscal rules, is now staring down a financial black hole that threatens to unravel her entire economic strategy. The £9.9 billion fiscal headroom that was meant to offer some breathing space has all but evaporated, swallowed by stagnating growth, soaring government borrowing costs, and persistently high interest rates. The reality is stark. Reeves faces an agonizing choice between slashing public spending or imposing fresh tax hikes on an already overburdened population. And with the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, set to release new forecasts in March, the pressure is mounting by the day. The question isn't whether cuts or taxes are coming, it's how soon and how severe. Behind closed doors, Treasury officials are scrambling to contain the fallout. Reeves is reportedly desperate to avoid an emergency budget, fearing the political optics of announcing brutal cuts or tax rises just months after Labour's triumphant election victory. But with a downgraded GDP growth forecast expected to drop from 1.1% to a dismal 0.7%, the numbers simply don't add up. JP Morgan has already sounded the alarm, warning that the Chancellor's fiscal hole is far deeper than previously anticipated. Alan Monks, the bank's chief UK economist, has painted a bleak picture, stating bluntly that Reeves's financial strategy is unravelling. Higher government borrowing costs, coupled with weaker growth, mean that the once-touted ironclad fiscal rules are now at serious risk of being shattered. For the British public, the most immediate fear is what Reeves will do next. One of the likeliest outcomes is an extension of the income tax threshold freeze, a stealth tax that quietly drags more people into higher tax brackets. While politically safer than announcing explicit tax hikes, the move would have devastating consequences for millions of hard-working Brits who are already struggling with the cost of living crisis. Goldman Sachs has piled on the warnings, suggesting that the government's entire fiscal headroom could be wiped out, and if that happens, Reeves will have no choice but to take drastic action. Labour may have campaigned on promises of fairness and economic competence, but the harsh reality of governing is beginning to bite. Meanwhile, the Bank of England is attempting to stave off further economic turmoil, with expectations that interest rates will be cut from 4.75% to 4.5% in an attempt to stimulate growth. But with inflation proving more stubborn than anticipated, any hopes of significant rate cuts this year are quickly fading. The financial markets are rattled, and confidence in the UK economy is rapidly diminishing. Treasury insiders are reportedly exploring every possible accounting trick to avoid making tough decisions before the next election cycle. One proposal under consideration is pushing spending reductions further into the future, specifically targeting the fiscal year 2029 to 30, to avoid the immediate political fallout. But such tactics are unlikely to fool the markets, and more importantly, they do nothing to solve the country's deep-rooted economic woes. As the crisis unfolds, Reeves has attempted to present a more optimistic front, announcing initiatives aimed at stimulating growth. Proposals for Heathrow expansion, planning reforms and deregulation have been rolled out, but these are long-term strategies that will take years, if not decades, to bear fruit. The OBR has already indicated that it will not take these measures into account due to the lack of immediate, tangible impact. And while Reeves fights to maintain control of Britain's crumbling finances, another scandal has erupted, one that exposes the complete failure of the Home Office to enforce the UK's border laws. Dorian Puka, an Albanian criminal who was deported twice for burglary, has returned to Britain once again, this time flaunting his lavish lifestyle in a £300,000 Rolls-Royce while the government stands powerless to remove him. Puka, now claiming asylum, has mocked British authorities on social media, posting videos of himself cruising through London's streets, flaunting Rolex watches and celebrating New Year's Eve in high-end clubs. The audacity of this situation is breathtaking. This is a man who was first jailed in 2016 for breaking into a home while the owner watched in horror from a webcam in France. Deported in 2017, he wasted no time returning to the UK, where he embarked on another burglary spree before being caught again and sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Despite a second deportation in 2020, Puka found his way back into Britain by the end of the same year. Now, thanks to the sluggish and ineffective asylum process, the Home Office is legally unable to deport him until his case is fully processed, something that could take years given the backlog of immigration appeals. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has slammed the government's impotence, describing Puka as a proper wrong'un who is walking all over the system. While ministers insist they are working to tighten immigration rules, this case exemplifies the utter failure of the current system. How can the government claim to be serious about border security when a convicted criminal can return multiple times, evade deportation, and openly mock British law enforcement? Meanwhile, another controversy is brewing in Westminster, this time over Labour's secretive Chagos Islands deal with Mauritius. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel has lashed out at the government, demanding evidence that the agreement is in Britain's national interest. Patel, who has been relentlessly challenging Keir Starmer's administration over the issue, has accused Labour of hiding behind a national security fig leaf, while finalising a deal that could undermine Britain's global standing. The proposed handover of the Chagos Islands, a strategically vital territory in the Indian Ocean, has sparked fears that China could exploit the situation to expand its influence. Senior figures in Donald Trump's inner circle have already expressed concerns, warning that the deal could weaken Western security interests. Patel's outrage is shared by many within the Conservative Party, who see this as yet another betrayal by Starmer's government. Reports suggest that Labour is prepared to hand over £18 billion to Mauritius in exchange for relinquishing control of the islands, a staggering sum at a time when Reeves is pleading poverty and preparing tax rises for British citizens. Why is this government handing billions to a foreign government while cutting benefits, raising taxes, and making life harder for ordinary Brits? Patel thundered in an explosive GB News interview. They are selling out our national security for what? Labour insists that the deal will include safeguards to protect the military base on Diego Garcia from malign influence. But Patel and others remain deeply sceptical, warning that there is no guarantee that China won't establish a listening station or military presence in the region once the islands are transferred. As outrage over the deal grows, yet another political earthquake is shaking the landscape. Reform UK has surged to the top of national polls for the first time in history. Nigel Farage's insurgent party has overtaken both Labour and the Conservatives, marking a seismic shift in British politics. Former Tory Deputy Chairman Jonathan Gullis has urged Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch to formulate a strategy to counter Reform's rapid rise. With disillusionment at an all-time high, Reform is capitalising on public anger, particularly in Wales and Scotland, where their support is surging. The latest YouGov poll places Reform at 25%, 1 point ahead of Labour and a full 4 points ahead of the Conservatives. The Tories, still reeling from their election defeat, are struggling to present a clear alternative, and many former Tory voters are now backing Farage's movement as a protest against both major parties. Gullis has warned that if the Conservatives fail to act, Reform could secure even more victories in local elections, further destabilising the political landscape. The spectre of Reform winning mayoral races, gaining more councillors, and cementing itself as the primary opposition force looms large. With economic turmoil, immigration scandals, secretive foreign deals, and a populist insurgency reshaping British politics, one thing is clear: the next few months will be a defining moment for the nation. Reeves, Starmer, Badenoch, none of them can afford to misstep. But as the pressure mounts, the cracks in the system are becoming impossible to ignore. Britain is at a crossroads, and the stakes couldn't be higher.